My name is Margaret Lane, and I was the one who brought the wooden box. I balanced it in both hands the way you carry a sleeping child, careful with every step through the doorway of Riverside Hall, where my daughter's birthday candles waited for a match. The box smelled faintly of orange oil and Tide water. Inside, under velvet and an old ribbon, lay a small key and what 3 generations before me had signed to protect, a home on the river that still creaked when storm winds turned. Ethan tapped his spoon against a glass before I could set the box down. He flashed the kind of smile that asks for applause and never pays for it. "To Clara," he said, arm around my daughter's waist. "To family." Laughter answered him, bright and brittle. He kept his eyes on me as if I were a stain on white linen. "And to keeping tonight for the people who truly belong." The word truly hung like a bad note. I felt Clara's fingers twitch against her dress. I felt my own shoulders square. I took one step forward, ready to offer the gift I'd guarded longer than my widowhood. Ethan moved first. "Margaret," he said, voice pleasant as a locked door. "Why don't you head home? We'll swing by tomorrow." The room went quiet in the way a church goes quiet when someone drops a hymn book. I slid the box closer to my chest. If he wanted me small, he should have chosen a different night. I turned without a word, the key shifting inside like a whisper that refused to be ignored. When I pulled into my driveway that night, the porch light was flickering again, half alive, half gone, like it couldn't decide whether to welcome me home or remind me how alone I was. I sat there in the driver's seat long after the engine stopped ticking, my hand still gripping the wheel. Inside the car, the silence felt heavier than it had at the restaurant. The words Ethan had said, "This party's for family only," kept echoing in my head, each one sharper than the last. I carried the wooden box inside and set it on the kitchen table. The ribbon was still tied neatly around it, the same one I'd chosen that morning when I thought the day would end differently. I brushed my fingers across the lid, tracing the carved initials of my grandparents. The box had been passed down through generations, each woman in our family adding something to it, letters, recipes, keepsakes. My contribution was supposed to be the deed to the river house, wrapped in a velvet cloth, waiting for Clara when I was ready to give it to her. But after tonight, I wasn't sure when or if that day would come. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me. I poured a small glass of wine and stood by the window, watching rain clouds gather above the river. The air smelled like wet pine and salt. I had always loved this town, the way the tide came in gentle, the way even storms felt like they belonged. But that night, everything felt different. The calm had turned brittle. My phone buzzed. Ruth Myers. She'd been my closest friend since my teaching days, and now she was a real estate lawyer. I hesitated before answering. "Margaret, you home?" she asked. "I'm here," I said quietly. I heard from someone who was at the dinner. She continued carefully. "Are you okay?" I stared at the wooden box. "I've been better." Ruth exhaled. "Listen, there's something you need to know. Ethan stopped by my office last week, said he was looking into the title for Calhoun House." My heart sank. "He mentioned the River House by name?" "Yes. He was asking if it could be transferred quickly. Said his wife and mother-in-law were considering selling. I assumed you knew." I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the counter. I didn't. I thought so. I didn't tell him anything, of course. But Margaret, he's planning something. After I hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at the box as if it might speak. The rain began to fall, light at first, then harder, tapping against the windows like an impatient visitor. Ethan had humiliated me in front of everyone. I could have lived with that. The gossip, the pitying looks. But this? Trying to steal the home Thomas and I built our lives around? That was something else entirely. I went upstairs to the study and pulled out the file where I kept every record of the house: deeds, tax receipts, insurance forms. Each page carried our name, our history. I spread them out across the desk, smoothing the creases. The papers felt like armor. When I came back downstairs, I opened the box. The key to the house rested on top of the velvet cloth, tarnished but solid. I held it in my hand and remembered the day Thomas had given it to me. A home, he'd said, only matters if the people inside it do. Somewhere between that moment and tonight, the meaning had changed. The next morning, I drove to Ruth's office downtown. Charleston was quiet after the rain, the streets shining with puddles that caught bits of sunlight. Ruth met me at the door with coffee and a look that said she already knew why I was there. "I want to protect the house," I said simply. She nodded and opened a folder. "There's something called a restriction filing. It stops any sale or transfer until a judge reviews it. It's not aggressive, it's just smart." She explained the details in careful terms, but I only caught pieces: injunction, protective clause, ownership record, the language of defense. I signed where she told me to sign. My hands didn't shake this time. As I left her office, a breeze came off the river, cool and salt-heavy. I breathed it in and felt something shift, a quiet, deliberate anger turning into resolve. That evening, Clara called. Her voice was hesitant, the way it always was when she was caught between me and her husband. "Mom, Ethan said some investors backed out of a project," she said. "He thinks it's because of a legal issue with your property. Did you do something?" "I did what any homeowner would do," I replied. "I made sure what's mine stays that way." There was a pause. "He's really upset. Mom, he said you don't trust him." "I don't," I said softly. "And neither should you." She didn't answer. The silence on the line stretched until she finally said, "Maybe we can talk tomorrow." When I hung up, I felt a sting of guilt, but I reminded myself that guilt and love often live in the same room. I stepped out onto the porch. The river was calm again, moonlight dancing across its surface. From somewhere down the street, a dog barked, and the sound carried through the still night air. I thought of Clara as a little girl, running barefoot on this same porch, her hair wild in the wind, her father chasing her with a laugh that still echoed in my memory. I pressed the key against my palm until it left a mark. "You'll stay in this family," I whispered to the house, "one way or another." When I finally went inside, I placed the key and the deed back into the box and locked it tight. Tomorrow. Ethan would learn that some women don't shout when they fight. They build walls, legal ones, and let silence do the rest. I turned off the lights, leaving only the porch lamp glowing faintly outside, steady for once, as if the house itself had made up its mind. 3 days later, the air felt heavier, as if Charleston itself was holding its breath. I just finished watering the ferns on my porch when I saw Ethan's black sedan slide to a stop outside my gate again. His window rolled down halfway. "Morning, Margaret," he said, wearing that same grin from the birthday dinner, sharp, charming, and soulless. "Got a minute?" I didn't answer. I turned the garden hose off and coiled it neatly. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his cuffs like a man about to close a deal instead of start a war. "I heard there's a bit of an issue with the title to the river house," he said lightly. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" I brushed dirt from my gloves. "I would. It's called protecting what's mine." His smile faltered. "You're making a mistake. Investors don't like uncertainty. And this restriction you filed, it's scaring them off. Clara and I could have made something beautiful there. Clara doesn't even know you've been trying to sell it. He looked at me, surprised I knew. People talk, I said. Lawyers, neighbors, even waiters. He laughed, a sound like metal scraping glass. You think this little legal trick will stop me? Once Clara signs over her share, that house is ours. That's where you're wrong. Ethan, I said quietly, she doesn't have a share. Not yet. His jaw tightened. He turned to leave, but paused. You should be careful. Playing with contracts can get messy. Wouldn't want you to forget something important in all that paperwork. It wasn't a threat. Not in words. But it crawled under my skin anyway. When his car pulled away, I stood there long enough to feel the sweat dry on my back. I went inside and called Ruth. He came here, I said. Did he threaten you? Not directly, but he's desperate. Good, Ruth said. Desperate men make mistakes. Just don't face him alone again, all right? I promised her I wouldn't. I lied. That night. Clara called again. Her voice was small. Mom, can we meet tomorrow? Ethan's upset. He says you've filed something that's hurting us financially. He's been drinking a lot. Come by the house, I told her. Both of you. The next afternoon, the air outside shimmered with heat. I set out 2 glasses of sweet tea and 1 of water, guessing correctly that Ethan would refuse anything that wasn't his idea. When they arrived, Clara's face looked drawn, her smile brittle. Ethan held her hand too tightly, the kind of grip that claims ownership. I gestured toward the table on the porch. Have a seat. He didn't. Let's not pretend this is polite. You've sabotaged me. I met his eyes. No, Ethan, you sabotaged yourself. Clara flinched. Stop, both of you. She turned to me. Mom, just tell me what's going on. Did you file something? I nodded. A restriction on the title. It prevents the sale or transfer until all parties are cleared. It protects the property. Ethan barked a laugh. Protects? You mean traps? She's locking us out of our own future. Clara. I opened the wooden box again and took out the folded deed, its edges soft from years of handling. This is your father's signature, I said, pointing to the faded ink. And your grandfather's. They passed this house through trust, not greed. Ethan stepped closer. You can't keep using the past to control the future. And you can't keep using my daughter to fund yours, I said, voice steady. Clara looked between us, confusion and dawning realization mixing like storm clouds. Ethan, what does she mean? He hesitated just long enough. She's twisting things. Clara, I was trying to create something that benefits all of us. By lying to her? Ruth's voice came from behind him. She stepped through the doorway, holding a folder. Funny thing about investors, they start calling lawyers when contracts fall apart. Ethan spun around, his calm cracking. You set me up. No, I said. You set yourself up the moment you thought I wouldn't fight back. He started toward me, but Ruth's voice cut through the air like a judge's gavel. Touch that deed, and it's evidence, tampering. The silence that followed was deep enough to hear the cicadas outside. Clara stood, trembling, her hand over her mouth. Ethan, she whispered, tell me you didn't do this. He didn't answer. You told me the house was part of our retirement, she said, voice rising. You said Mom wanted us to renovate together. His mask slipped completely. It was supposed to be ours. Do you know what that land is worth? She's sitting on a gold mine. I'm sitting on my husband's memory, I said sharply, and you can't buy that with anyone's money. He stared at me, chest heaving. You'll regret this. I doubt it. He stormed off the porch, slamming the gate behind him. Clara sank into the chair he'd just vacated. tears cutting lines through her makeup. I sat beside her, letting the quiet do the talking for a while. "Finally," she whispered. "How long have you known?" "Since Ruth called me after your birthday." "And you didn't tell me?" I touched her hand gently. "Because I needed you to see it for yourself. Some truths have to hurt before they heal." She looked toward the gate where Ethan had disappeared. "I thought he loved me." "Maybe he loved what you could give him," I said softly. "That's not the same thing." The afternoon light fell through the trees, scattering gold across the porch floor. Clara leaned against me, silent, eyes fixed on the empty road. For the first time, I felt her see the world without him in it, and it didn't look so small anymore. After she left, Ruth stayed behind. "You did well," she said. "I just wanted her to open her eyes." She did, and now she'll decide what to do next. When Ruth drove away, I walked down to the edge of the river. The water glimmered with the reflection of the setting sun. I thought about Ethan's words, "You'll regret this." Maybe I would, but not tonight. Tonight, I felt something else, relief, sharp and clean like air after rain. Behind me, the porch light came on automatically, casting long shadows across the lawn. The swing creaked in the evening breeze. I ran my hand over the old railing, the paint rough under my palm, and whispered to the house, "You're safe now." The next morning, I found a note slid under my door. No envelope, just a folded sheet of paper. Ethan's handwriting slanted, impatient. "You think you've won, but people like me don't lose. They wait." I read it twice, then fed it to the fire in the hearth. The flame caught fast, curling the paper inward until it was nothing but ash. He could wait all he wanted. Some battles end the moment you stop letting someone's shadow reach your door, and mine had just ended. The house had been quiet for weeks, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. Morning light drifted across the kitchen table, glinting off the rim of my coffee cup. I could finally breathe without waiting for the next problem to appear. The world outside hummed with cicadas and the slow rhythm of the river, and for the first time since that awful birthday dinner, it felt like the house was on my side again. Clara called early that morning. Her voice was softer, steadier. "Mom," she said, "the divorce is finalized. It's over." I leaned against the counter, smiling at the wall as if she could see me. "Good," I said. "How do you feel?" "Strangely free," she admitted. "I thought I'd be sadder, but it's like I can finally think straight." "That's what peace feels like, sweetheart. It's quiet at first, then it grows." After we hung up, I stood at the window overlooking the river. Sunlight shimmered on the water, and the air smelled of salt and summer grass. The house seemed to exhale with me. Later that week, Clara drove down from the city to help with the garden. She wore Thomas's old flannel shirt, faded at the elbows, soft from years of washing, and it hung loose around her shoulders. We worked in silence, pulling weeds, trimming roses, letting the hum of bees fill the spaces where words didn't need to be. When we finally sat on the porch steps, hands dirty and knees aching, she spoke quietly. "I used to think staying strong meant pretending everything was fine, but now I think strength is letting yourself start over." I nodded. "Starting over is the bravest thing most people never do." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You never told me how you survived losing Dad." I smiled at the memory, not of his death, but of his life. By keeping busy, I suppose, fixing things, painting walls, cooking for people who didn't need it. But mostly, I survived because of you. She looked at me, eyes glassy. "Because of me? You were the reason I had to keep moving. Grief slows you down, but love, real love, makes you put one foot in front of the other." A light breeze brushed across the porch, carrying the scent of honeysuckle. I could almost hear Thomas humming somewhere in that breeze. That evening, Ruth stopped by with a thin folder. "It's official," she said, placing it on the table. "Ethan took the plea deal. No jail time, but he's banned from any financial work for 10 years. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Justice doesn't always need handcuffs. Ruth smiled. Sometimes it just needs patience. After she left, Clara and I took a walk along the river. The sun was setting, streaking the sky with orange and lavender. "You know," Clara said, "I'm thinking about staying here a while. Maybe open an art studio in the old guest room. I used to paint before. Everything." "You should," I said. "It's about time this house saw some new color." She smiled, eyes soft with hope. "Do you think Dad would approve?" I laughed quietly. He'd complain about the smell of paint, but he'd build you a shelf for the brushes. We reached the edge of the dock. The boards creaked beneath us, but they held, just like we had. The river moved slow and sure, carrying away what no one needed to keep. That night, after Clara went to bed, I sat at my desk to finish the letter I'd started months ago. The lamp cast a warm glow over the paper as I wrote, "My dear Clara, there will always be people who mistake your kindness for weakness, your silence for surrender. But you don't have to fight loudly to win. Sometimes the quiet path, the one filled with grace and dignity, is the one that lasts. Remember, home isn't a building or a deed. It's the place where you can be fully yourself and still be loved." I folded the letter and tucked it into the wooden box beneath the velvet cloth, next to the old key. That box had held pain, betrayal, and memories. But tonight, it held peace. The next morning, Clara made breakfast, bacon crisped at the edges and eggs slightly overdone. We ate on the porch, sunlight spilling across the table. "I called the community center," she said between bites. "They're hosting an art fair next month. I signed up for a booth." "That's wonderful," I said. "What will you paint?" "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Maybe the river. Maybe this house. Maybe just something that feels like breathing." "Then whatever it is," I said, "it'll be perfect." By late afternoon, neighbors began to stop by. The Taylors from up the road, Mrs. Pierce with her lemon pie, and a few curious kids who wanted to see the famous swing by the river. The house that once stood silent was now full of laughter and footsteps. Clara showed the children where her father had carved their initials into the old porch beam. The sound of her laughter filled the yard like a song I hadn't heard in years. As twilight deepened, everyone drifted home. Clara and I sat with glasses of sweet tea, watching fireflies spark above the grass. "I used to think happiness was something you had to chase," she said softly. "Now I think it's something that just waits for you to stop running." I smiled. That's the secret most people never learn. We sat in silence, listening to the creak of the swing and the gentle lap of water against the dock. I thought about how life had tried to break us, how it almost succeeded, and how, somehow, we had turned it into something worth keeping. Inside. The clock struck 9. I looked at Clara and said, "You know, I never thanked you for forgiving me." She frowned. "Forgiving you? For what?" "For waiting until you were ready to believe me. You trusted your own eyes. And that's how you found your strength." She reached for my hand. "I learned that from you." Later. After she went to bed, I lingered on the porch one last time. The moonlight painted the river silver, and the swing moved lazily in the night air. I could almost hear Thomas's voice, low and content. "You did good, Maggie." I smiled, whispering to the dark, "We did good." The world didn't need to know the story behind that victory. It didn't need headlines or applause. It just needed this moment, the quiet proof that love, once broken, could mend into something stronger. As I turned to go inside, the wooden boards groaned beneath my feet, the same sound they'd made all my life. It wasn't a warning. It was a heartbeat. Tomorrow. I'd hang new curtains, plant fresh marigolds, maybe bake for the neighbors. Life wouldn't be perfect, but it would be ours. And as I closed the door behind me, the river whispered the same truth it always had. We survive, we heal, and we begin again.